Hi, I don't know if it's working because it started and stopped. Let's try that again. Have you ever been watching an episode of Star Trek and thought to yourself, wait a second, haven't I seen this before? Well, the answer is probably. From series to series, we get episode do-overs that are a chance to retell and hopefully upgrade a previous story idea. But does the new episode always get it right? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in this live stream series called Double Take. Now let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the Savage Stream, the weekly live stream where we talk all things Star Trek. And today, I'm hoping you can hear and see me. Otherwise, I'm talking to myself. But if you're here live, hello and welcome. If you're watching on the replay, hello and welcome. Today, we are continuing our series of double takes where we compare two different episodes, except today we are comparing three different episodes. Let me know if you can hear me and let me know if I'm too loud. So the three episodes we're comparing that are before we've had episodes that were like totally copy paste, like completely copy paste. This, I feel it's more like the essence, like the story overall is retold. But there are some differences. So the three episodes we're going to compare today are TOS Arena, TNG's Darmok, and Strange New Worlds Terrarium. Now, Strange New Worlds is a combo of the other two. It's definitely trying to call back to Arena. It's trying to bring up those emotions of Arena. It's also trying to kind of justify its place in canon as a prequel. But the things that happen in the episode are a lot more like Darmok than they are like Arena. Arena was just like a battle to the death for no reason. So they flipped that so that Terrarium is like a friendship to the death for no reason. So without further ado, we're going to get into these three different episodes. And just to let you know how this is going to go, I will give you a little bit of a summary of each episode, then we'll judge them over three different categories, and then in the end we can decide which one wins as far as those three different categories. So it's not like totally apples to apples here, because Darmok and Arena don't totally have much together. So it's really like Terrarium's kind of in the middle. But I think they're all three good episodes and three super iconic, super memorable episodes. If you are a member of the away team, by the way, drop a barrel in the chat, because I love to see that. No one is saying I can't hear you, so I'm guessing that's good. Alrighty, let's check out the first episode on the list. Season 1, Episode 18, Arena. The Enterprise crew finds a Starfleet outpost under attack by a mysterious alien force. As they chase the alien ship through uncharted space, both vessels suddenly lose propulsion as they discover that they have violated Metron space. As punishment, the Metrons force both captains to fight to the death to determine which ship can go free and which will be destroyed. In the end, Captain Kirk realizes the Gorn were acting in self-defense and decides not to kill the Gorn captain. This act of mercy impresses the Metrons, and they ultimately let both ships go. So, when I first saw that episode, which was recently, because I just started watching the original series this year, I had so many big thoughts. Okay, so when this episode starts, the away team goes to this space station that's under attack, and so we see a bunch of people on the planet, but there's this particular scene where it's Kirk and Spock, and they're fighting this unknown enemy that are kind of like shooting at them from the hills, and there's just rubble and wreckage everywhere, and everything looks all bombed out, and there's this part where Spock is like, I see them, they're in the mountains or something like that. And Kirk is like, got it. And so he like does this dive and roll from one boulder to another boulder, I guess to hide, to take cover from fire or something like that. And then he like fires his phasers. And the reason why that scene just tickled me so much is because Galaxy Quest is a movie that I absolutely love. If you have not seen it, highly recommend. It's a love letter to Star Trek fans. And the actor who's playing like the Kirk character in that movie does that exact thing. There's a scene where he's just like rolling from rock to rock for no reason, and the female lead of the movie is just like, does that help you get there faster? And he's like, yes, or whatever. So when I saw this scene, I was like, oh my gosh, this is where Tim Allen got it from. Like, he didn't make that up. This literally like was plucked directly from an episode. Ooh, PS2 Chipper has gifted 20 memberships. So if you are not yet a member, now is the time. And I see a bunch of people picking up those memberships. There it goes. So I'm going to keep talking, but yeah, grab these memberships while they're there. Grab the memberships while they're there. Thank you, PS2 Chipper. So that just like tickled me to see Kirk do that and to be like, oh my gosh, this came from somewhere. Like, this wasn't totally made up. Okay, so under fire, unfortunate. then they get in this space race because they like blast them with something, and then the aliens run away. So then the Enterprise is like, get them. We need to get revenge for our colleagues or whatever for this bombed out space station or whatever colony. And so they're like racing, and they apparently accidentally go into Metron space. Which, here's a question for you guys. How are they marking their territory? Like, how does one mark one's territory in space? Because however people do it, it seems ineffective, right? Because we always have these episodes where people are accidentally trespassing on other people's space, but like it's space and there's no signs or anything. Conversation for another day. So the Metrons are like, you guys are both barbaric alien species, clearly, because you're trying to kill each other. So to teach you a lesson, we're going to pit you in a fight to the death. Because you guys are trying to kill each other, we're going to make sure one of you kills each other, and then whoever wins, they can go free. But we're going to destroy the other ship. There's not a lot of logic in it, you know? No, it's okay. It's okay, PS2 Chipper. I wanted the alarms to be set off. I love this. Also, if you become a subscriber to this channel, it will also do this. So if you're not a subscriber yet, definitely subscribe. So I can be like, woohoo, so-and-so subscribed. So this episode was fun. It was good times. Like that scene I just showed, that was also just so great, right? When Kirk is fighting the Gorn captain and he's like trying to hit him in really slow motion. I'm guessing it's because the costume was a bit fragile. I don't know. For all you people who do the deep dives, definitely let me know. But that's like my thinking, is that maybe the actual costume was like not too hardy. So they wanted to make sure the actor didn't like turn or twist too much or pull anything. And so it was like very slow motions, and Kirk is like very slowly ducking out of the way. It's just so much fun. But the episode itself is pretty hardcore and awful. It's a little bit Hunger Games. So these two people are pitted against each other, and Kirk is like, well, I'm screwed, because the Gorn captain's like super strong and Kirk is not. So the Gorn captain's like throwing giant boulders and breaking off giant branches to beat him to death with and all this stuff. And Kirk is just like, his double-handed fist punch is not working. His charms are not working. His high kick is not working. He's all out of ideas. So then he finds, he's like, oh, wait, with the materials left on this planet, I can build a rudimentary cannon or something like that. So he does that. And he like blasts the Gorn captain just before the Gorn captain strangles him to death. And then he's got like this big rock, and he's going to smash him like a bug. And just before he brings the rock down on the Gorn captain's head, he's like, wait a minute. Is this really the way? And he makes a good point that while from his perspective, the Gorn were the aggressors, because there was this Federation outpost chilling, doing their own thing, not bothering anybody, and then the Gorn come along and start blowing them up. But when he thought about it, he was like, wait, and saw things from the Gorn's perspective. Apparently that was also in Gorn space like that. And so it was, I don't know, but he realized that they felt like the Federation was maybe trying to encroach on their territory, or was trying to attack them, and they were defending their space and their property and their territory. So then Kirk was like, wait, who's really the bad guy here? Maybe this was just like a miscommunication that ended up in a lot of violence, and we don't have to let the violence continue. And so then the Metrons are like, wow, because you spared his life, there's hope for you yet, humanity. Check us back out in 1,000 years or so, or something like that. And we want to see, like, maybe you'll be on our level or whatever. The Metrons are a little bit douchey. I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion. But I feel like they're just, like, not great people. But because they're all powerful, they're kind of like Q, I guess. They can do stuff like this. So Kirk is like, you know what? I don't want to destroy the Gorn captain, because I feel like he was acting in self-defense. We were acting in self-defense. So let's just kind of call it a draw. So the Metrons are like, okay, if you insist. And then the Metrons like super speed them out of Metron space, and they end up, I forget how far, but some number of light years, I think like 40 light years or something like that, away from Metron space, and the Gorn captain's nowhere to be found. So presumably the Metrons beamed them or transported them quickly in the opposite direction, or back towards Gorn space, wherever that is. There's a little bit of a hanging question mark though, like what are we gonna tell Starfleet about that outpost? But whatever, not important for this episode. So there's a lot of things going on in this episode, and I do want to break down how I feel like it ranks in these 3 different categories. But overall, I can see why it's so iconic. It's so memorable. It's fun to watch. You're kind of like half rooting for Kirk, half laughing at Kirk, or maybe that was me. And it's like half of you is like, go, go, go. And then half of you is like, this is so ridiculous, but also pretty terrifying. If this was a legit scenario, the part I think that the part when I knew that Kirk was in real trouble was not when the Gorn picked up a giant boulder and threw it. It was when the Gorn started speaking English. I was like, ruh-roh. Because this whole time we're thinking like, oh, they can't understand each other and that's why they can't communicate. But then when it turns out that the Metrons have installed some kind of universal translator in this whole situation, and that everything they'd been saying to each other, the Gorn totally understood. They just chose not to speak until like halfway through the episode, and the only thing they wanted to say was a bunch of threats. Like, I'm gonna kill you. You know, it was like, dang, that's when I was like, oh, you're in trouble now. Because the Gorn is not just strong, but this, I'm guessing he, is also like pretty clever and pretty ruthless. And I would also consider Kirk pretty clever, but I wouldn't consider him super strong, and I certainly wouldn't consider him ruthless, which is what you kind of need in a fight to the death. Although this time he got to use his cleverness to escape. Okay, so I want to check a couple things in the chat and then talk about where I think this episode lands with our 3 different categories. Yeah, I love this. I loved this when I was a kid. Yeah, I didn't watch this as a kid, but watching this as an adult, I can totally see why people enjoy this. It's so iconic and so much fun. Okay, I'm seeing some people like just love Darmok. It's so interesting because some people love Darmok. Other people are like, no, thank you. Yay, we got another membership. Hey, Scott, you finally got one. You've been saying for a while you need to grab a membership. And thanks to PS2 Chipper, today was that day, sir. Trek loves all-powerful aliens messing with humans. It really does, but it doesn't do it as often as it could, right? Mythbusters tested the canon idea and it would not work. Oh, that's a bummer. Patty said filmed. What was the name of this place in California where this was filmed? Vasquez Rocks. Okay. I was going to say I have no idea, but of course someone here does. Can we form some sort of rudimentary lathe? Okay, Windgrace. Okay, that was the other thing. I totally forgot to mention it. So there's the scene where, right, Kirk makes this cannon and it's just great fun. But then that same scene happens also in Galaxy Quest where the captain character is fighting a giant rock monster. Like the monster is made out of rocks. And the rest of the crew is trying to give him tips on how to survive this fight against this giant rock monster. And one guy is like, go for his eyes, go for his neck, go for the vulnerable parts. And he's like, it's a rock. It doesn't have any vulnerable parts. And they're all giving him just like the worst advice. And then one crewman is just like, oh, I know. And they're like, what? And he's like, look around you and see if you can form some sort of rudimentary lathe. And they're like, get off of the line, guy. And they like hit him and they push him to the side. It's hilarious. So after preparing for this conversation, I absolutely went and looked up just that clip on YouTube and just like watched it 5 times in a row because it just is so funny. I don't know. It tickles me. Okay, so it wasn't just me. They were super douchey. Okay, it wasn't just me. Oh, what? The intro with the shelling gave Shatner and Nimoy permanent hearing damage for the rest of their lives. Is that true? Because that's awful and totally unnecessary. Like, totally unnecessary. The rock monsters Shatner wanted for Final Frontier but did not get. The rock monster was so great. So great. Okay, so on that note, let's go ahead and look at the categories. Whoop. Okay. Boop. All right, so these are the 3 categories that we're going to judge this episode on for Arena. That is the alien look / kind of set deck in general, the character development, and the storytelling. So for the alien look, I mean, the Gorn is so iconic. And yeah, it looks cheesy and terrible and like a Halloween costume. But honestly, the Gorn outfit in this episode still looks better to me than the freaking Cele and Antikins in TNG. Like the snake people and the like dog people. This looks better than that. Because this was at least a full body costume. And they went through the effort. I mean, you could see how slow the actor was moving to like keep that intact. So clearly they did some stuff. For the Antikins and the Cele, I swear they just went to Party City and bought some masks and just like threw them on some actors and were like, do your best. So like, I can't even fault them for that. Aside from it being the 60s, I can't even fault them for that. So I think the Gorn are really fun. Like they're so what a fun Halloween costume. It's so iconic. It's so catchy. It's maybe not necessarily good. Like it doesn't look good, but it is memorable and catchy, iconic, spacey. So I'm going to give it major points for that. Character development. Is there character development in this episode? What do you think? I mean, I guess in the end, Kirk is like, I don't have to take revenge. So there's that. Is that a theme that continues through the rest of TOS? That's a question for you if you've watched all of TOS. Maybe. And maybe it's character development for the Metrons, for them to be less douchey in the future, but I don't think so. So I don't know. Character development on this one, I'm not super seeing it, but let me know in the chat if you disagree. Storytelling. This episode felt a little bit disjointed because we had the shelling in the beginning, and then we had the space race, and then we had the fight to the death, and then it was kind of like done. But the real like push of the story was the fight to the death, and I don't know if those first two pieces totally tie into that last piece. And then when the Metrons show up in the end and they're like, yes, we are the Metrons, blah blah blah, it's also a little bit like, huh? So as far as storytelling, it could have been more cohesive, but I also feel like, just in watching the episodes I've seen so far of TOS, that's how the episodes are, though. They're a little disjointed, right? There's kind of like an idea here at the beginning of the episode that doesn't necessarily match the middle, that doesn't necessarily match the end, but it's still really enjoyable. And by the end, you're like, wow, didn't see that coming. So I'm here for that. Like, I don't think it's the most cohesive thing in the world, but I don't think it's terrible. So I'd also give it some points there. But, let me know what you think in the chat. Finally did it. I know. Love it. Oh, tinnitus. Arena loses just a bit in the alien look. I don't know. I mean, it's fun. The Gorn suit is definitely as bad as the Antikins and Selly, but that's a pretty low bar. I don't know. The Antikins and Selly just felt insulting to me. A little bit of character development. The dispute over Cestus 3 had even Spock wondering if they were the good guys. So, like, some. Okay. All right, on that note, let's look at the second episode on the list. Season 5, Episode 2, Darmok. Picard is stranded on a planet with Captain Dathan of the Temerians, whose language is based on metaphors. Dathan's plan is to force them to cooperate against a dangerous predator and therefore seal their allegiance to each other. It's confusing, frustrating, and heartwarming all at the same time. Okay, so Darmok, honestly, I did not like this episode as a kid. I don't think I got it. I was too young to understand what all was going on, and I think just all the speaking in metaphors was really annoying to me, because I was like, just speak plainly, like, what is going on here? So as a kid, this was not my favorite. This was not my favorite episode. I think the context clues is the whole point, is like, you're supposed to understand what's going on by just like, you're supposed to go through the mystery with Picard while he's trying to figure out what's going on. Like, we as the audience are supposed to be kind of taken along on that ride with him. But as a kid, I just remember being really bored with this one and really confused and just kind of like, whatever. And in the end, the guy died. And I was like, but as an adult, for the TNG podcast, when it was time to review this episode, I was like, oh man, this is going to suck. Because I remember not liking it as a kid. Then when I rewatched it, I was like, this is so interesting. Like, this should happen more often. Why is it that almost every alien species they ever run into, they can completely understand, even with the universal translator, for the reasons mentioned in this episode? There's this conversation between, I think, Troy and, I want to say it's either Troy and Data in this episode, or it's Troy and Picard in the episode Instance of Command, where she's talking about the Shellyak and how they have a different language. It's one of those episodes, but where Troy is explaining to somebody about how, like, I could just say some random word and point at a cup of tea, and then and then she was like, what did I say? And they were like, you said tea. She was like, how do you know? Maybe I said glass, maybe I said cup, maybe I said drink, maybe I said thirsty. She was just like, language is so complicated and layered that it's hard to understand the nuances. And it was this episode that made me go, like, yeah, this should happen all the time, because it's not just about having words, but words in a certain order also mean something, but also words have the denotation and the connotation. There's the actual definition of the word, and then there's how we use it in speech, how we use it colloquially, how we use it to mean other things. And so I feel like there should be way more misunderstandings, like so many, like all the time. So this episode was kind of like, oh yeah, we should be seeing people being confused. We should be seeing people not being able to communicate clearly and having to work around it. So the Captain Dathan risked his life in order to be able to find common ground and communicate with the Federation, which I think is really special and noble and tragic. Like, I wish he could have done something else. Like, we couldn't have done this in the holodeck. I don't know. But because he went through what he did, Picard did get it. And because Picard was Picard. Honestly, what do you think with this episode? Would Darmok work with any other Starfleet captain that we've seen in the shows? Would this episode work with Kirk? Would it work with Janeway? Would it work with Cisco? Would it work with Archer? I don't know. Is that the captain's name in Enterprise? Would it work with all these other captains? Or is this a unique thing to Picard? Now, I think for some of the other captains, this situation, they could have still ended up there, right? Because Starfleet kind of has a way about them. But I think Picard was so the man for the job, because he's going to be going out of his way to be like, let me understand what you're saying. How can we figure this out? Let me look at your notebook. Maybe draw a picture. Maybe if I mimic, do some mimes, like how can we really get to understand each other? And they were really meeting each other on that level. And I think that's really cool. Yeah, sorry. There's so many things in the chat that I have not been looking at because I've just been going on and on. Okay, someone else said I hated this episode. Dustin says I hated this episode as a kid. Okay, so it wasn't just me. PS2 Chipper says I think TNG did it differently. Scott says, yay, Picard and Dathan at Eladra 4. Is that the name of that planet they were on? Another iconic episode. Yes. It's no beast at Tanagra. Sci-Fi Savage, her arms closed. Yeah, but okay, so that being said, while I think it is super interesting, I still think it's frustrating. Still think it's so frustrating. I think if I was in this situation, I would be very cranky and unhappy. And also, what's the word? I don't know how I would feel about him putting me in mortal danger so that we could understand each other better. So I guess it depends on the day of the week how I would feel about that, but it would be negative, okay? It would not be like, well, let's get to know each other and bond against this common foe. It'd be like, what the heck, dude? And actually Picard's first reaction was, there was that scene when Dathan comes running through the woods and like has a knife, and he's like handing the hilt to Picard, and Picard's like, get that away from me. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you. And he's like, I'm not trying to fight you. The monster's coming. You need the knife. But he can't say that in regular words, right? So he's like, blah, 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 his arm's open or whatever. And he's trying to hand this knife. And so Picard's like, no, no, no. And then when the monster comes, Picard's like, okay, let me get the knife. I would have the same reaction where if he came running at me with a knife, I'd be like, no, I'm not going to fight you. Or maybe I'd be like, okay, let me fight you. I don't know what I would do. But I would misunderstand that what he's saying is a monster's coming. And the best way to fight this this like chameleon electricity monster is this dagger. This is going to be our best defense. Couldn't use phasers. It's going to be this. Yeah, Darmok had at its center the importance of communication. In that regard, it reminded me of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah, totally. I still think it's an episode that has two of Trek's best scenes and a lot of bad filter. An invisible enemy that shows up randomly. Is that the bad thing? Oh, I'll keep going. A language that has to have another language to teach it. So why don't they communicate with with others in that language? A B plot, which is just the crew trying to get Picard back and failing at it. And then Sayla says, Janeway. Yeah, so I think this episode has a lot of interesting parts to it. I also find it, like I said earlier, I still find it frustrating to watch though, because I'm like, I don't know, it's just, especially how much, as a podcaster, I love talking, I love communicating, right? And to have somebody, I'm imagining someone on my podcast who's only speaking in metaphors, like that would drive me crazy very, very quickly. So I don't know, but it's interesting. Yeah, I feel like Janeway, so my question about would Janeway do this is like, we had the episode Macrocosm, sorry. We had the episode Macrocosm with the giant viruses that are going around the ship and trying to destroy them, right? That episode starts with Janeway and Neelix getting back from an away mission to meet the Tac-Tac. And Janeway put her hands on her hips, which is apparently the most offensive thing you could possibly do in their society. And so Neelix had to step in and apologize for her and like communicate some kind of like truce on their way back home. So that's the only reason why I'm like, I don't know if Janeway would be as good at this whole like let us communicate thing, because she was just like, I couldn't get the Tac-Tac thing. I didn't get it. Like, F that. This was not the thing for me. So it makes me wonder, like, if she would be good in this Darmok situation, or if she would just be like, what do you want me to do? What's going on? Like, I could see her being more, like, frustrated and asking a lot of questions than maybe being like, is the picture something? Can we draw something in the sand? But I don't know. Like I said, Starfleet. So maybe they all would be just fine. Would have worked with Janeway, and she would have killed the invisible threat with the dagger. That's funny. Captain Picard has a formidable intellect. Janeway has training in science, but I am not sure how much of a background she has in linguistics. Well, interesting you say that. Yes, Picard is intellectual, but I think they all are. And Picard does not have a background in linguistics. So in that same episode, Instance of Command, Counselor Troy was the one who was giving Picard lessons in linguistics so that he could communicate with the Shellyak effectively and not cause a war. So Picard didn't have those skills either. He really wanted to communicate. He has diplomatic skills, I would say, more than anything about his intellect or his book knowledge or any of that. That's wouldn't necessarily help him in this scenario. Troy's explanation was perfect when she said Juliet on the balcony, which I don't even remember. All right, so let's look at this episode with our 3 categories. Okay. Alien look / set deck, character development and storytelling. So set deck, we didn't talk about this for Arena, but it was basically just kind of like, out in the mountains. I think the set was perfect. Even like the shelling part of the set and also the fighting to the death part of the set, I think was perfect. It wasn't like terribly exciting or terribly spacey, but it doesn't always have to be spacey. Sometimes it could just be mountains with some like boulders. That's fine. For this episode, again, it was like mountains and some shrubs, and it was fine. Like, it was totally... I did not need alien plants. I didn't need alien fauna. I didn't need alien birds flying. This was fine. Mountainy, campfire, fine. Alien looks. Darmok's makeup was awesome. Was so good. It's really hard to compare apples to apples, though, because we're talking about 60s technology with the Gorn, and then, like, 90s technology with Darmok, and then 2025 technology with Strange New Worlds, which was, I mean, the actual Gorn was like a puppet that was created, but there was a ton of CGI as well. So it's really hard to compare just because technology will make them look better, but that makeup job was beautiful. It was great. Like, all the makeup jobs on TNG past the Selly and Antikin nonsense, like, so kind of past season 1, when it was a lot of like drawing on people's cheeks with Sharpies. Past that, the makeup jobs got so spectacular, so good. Even for characters who were there for like 10 seconds, they would have amazing makeups. So like, yeah, big points for Darmok. Darmok looked amazing. Character development. There was a ton of, I don't know, like, would you call this character development? Picard had to learn how to speak a whole nother language, which is like something Picard would do. Being an archaeologist at heart, loving old cultures, this seems right up his alley. So I don't know if I could call this character development in the sense that it's nothing new. This is already just like a passion of his, something that he loves. It's done in a different way. He usually likes to do it with things that are like long gone and dead and in the past, as opposed to in real time in a life or death situation. However, this does seem right up his alley. I think the friendship and bond that they create by the end is really, really sweet. But again, is there character development in this episode? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the chat or in the comments, because I'm not sure I see it. I'm not sure I see it. Okay, and then storytelling. Again, while this is, I don't want to say cohesive because that makes it seem like it makes sense. While this is not like a bunch of different pieces that don't go together, at the same time, it's just like mostly Picard trying to figure out what's going on, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. That's most of it. That's the story that's being told. And to Dustin's point, yes, it's a lot of the crew being like, how do we get Picard back from this planet? We can't beam him. That's impossible. We can't go down and get him. That's impossible. And so you're kind of like, really? It is? There's nothing you can do? So I don't know. I don't know if the storytelling is great, but similar to Arena, I think it's very iconic. It's very iconic. Like, a lot people remember this episode, whether they loved it or hated it. People remember this episode. So does that mean they remember it because the storytelling was amazing? I don't know why people remembered it. So I guess I'll give it some points for just the fact that it was memorable. So that means something, but I don't know if I would be like, oh man, the storytelling on this just like was amazing. Like I don't know. Just my thoughts. Let's see. Good makeup and prosthetics for the Temerians. I agree. I think it was beautiful. Never forget that in Trek, there are Takarians, Terrariums, and Temerians. Are there? What are the other two things? I don't know. What are Takarians and Terrariums? I don't know what that is. So that I did forget. Usually people tell me like, don't forget such and such, and I haven't. But that I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't know it to forget it. Meme with them, NASA with the tampons. I don't get it. Karen, what is this meme? Please say more. Scott says, is there decent storytelling in an episode where Picard literally tells a story? Yeah, but that's not what we're talking. That's like saying is the Flaughter episode great? Yeah, we're not talking about like a story in a story. We're talking about like the actual episode. Was the episode a well-told story? That's a different question. Did Picard tell a good story? We can ask that as a secondary question. Maybe not character development, but intellectually challenged, in my opinion. Who was intellectually? Do you mean Picard was intellectually challenged? I really like the Gilgamesh story. Yeah, it was good. I agree. The Terrarians were in Voyager. The Terrarians were in TNG's Suddenly Human. Oh, the Terrarians were in Voyager. Who were the Terrarians? Memorable for me because of the themes of communication and the chemistry between Picard and Dathan. Yeah. I'm glad that stuck out because like that was the whole idea. All right, so now let's move on to Picard's intellectually being challenged. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, let's move on to the last episode on the list, which is really the combination of these two. Season 3, Episode 9, Terrarium. Lieutenant Ortega's shuttle is pulled through a wormhole and crashes on a toxic moon. She meets a similarly stranded Gorn pilot, and over time, they form a bond. They work together to send a flaming SOS to the Enterprise, which arrives just in time. However, upon seeing the Gorn pilot, they immediately open fire, and Ortegas is heartbroken. In her anguish, she demands the puppet masters show themselves. In response, a Metron shows up to explain why they conducted this experiment before wiping her memory of this final encounter. So this episode was really good. And like I said, they were really trying to connect this episode to Arena. I don't think they were actively trying to connect it to Darmok. That was just a bit of a happy coincidence because they want to elevate the story, I'm assuming. So basically, Ortegas crash lands on the moon. This Gorn pilot crash lands on the moon. And it just so happened to also be a pilot because Ortegas is a pilot. And I disagree with you, Gavin. I think this episode's good. So the two of them end up communicating. Now, this is important because earlier in the season, like in the first episode, Ortegas was mortally wounded by a Gorn. She was like stabbed through the chest. And so she had all this PTSD for all of 3 minutes about dealing with the Gorn. So she was like having these nightmares and flashbacks and seeing Gorn all around her and all these things. They didn't super address it in throughout the episodes, but in this episode, when she crash lands on the moon, she finds that, of course, when she crashed, somehow the compartment that held all of her ration food and water was totally destroyed. So now she has no food, she has no water. She makes this like water reclaimer thing, but it like spazzes out on her and it only makes like a teaspoon of water. So she's like, all right, I have to go out into this moon and find something. Now she walks out on the moon's all toxic and she can't breathe and all this stuff. And it's just like, she thinks she's toast. And then she sees this like tent and she's like, oh great, somebody's in there. They've figured out how to survive on this moon. Maybe they can help me. And then she sees this giant Gorn and she's like, oh no, not a Gorn. This Gorn's going to try to eat me. But the Gorn ends up saving her life from some other monster things that are on the planet that like bite you and stuff. And so then they became friends. So the Metrons at the end of this episode, who are explaining to Ortegas why they did this, instead of doing a fight to the death, they specifically crash landed both of these pilots and created a scenario where they had to rely on one another. Ortegas had to rely on the Gorn pilot for food and water. The Gorn pilot needed Ortegas because she was super, super lonely. Or at least that's what the Metron said. And so this particular experiment was to see if humans and Gorn could ever be friends, or something like that the Metron says. Okay. Why would they care? Like, why do the Metrons care whether or not the two will ever be friends? They could just sit back and see if that will happen. Whatever experiment happens on this moon will have no bearing on what the entire human race will do with the entire Gorn race, but whatever. That's why the Metrons did this. And they do end up forming a friendship, and it is really sweet. Like, they're playing games together and hanging out together and talking together and all this stuff, and then Ortegas is like, okay, we're running out of everything, but there's this really toxic atmosphere. There's this cloud of whatever that's rolling towards them that's going to kill them all when their force field inevitably fails, which is on its last leg. So she's like, okay, I know what we can do. We can ignite the gas cloud like around us and set the entire planet on fire, but we're going to protect ourselves in this little metal cage, and my ship will see that from space and they will come get us. Because of course, when Ortegas got pulled through, there's like tons and tons and tons of moons and all kinds of things, and so the Enterprise doesn't know where to find her. And the little they're like in the aperture of the wormhole, the Enterprise is, and they're like wedging it open, and so they're just trying to scan to figure out which moon Ortegas landed on so they could pull her back out. But there's like 40 different moons or something, and they're like, we don't have time to scan them all, and this thing's gonna close, and plus they need to get somewhere to send, I think they had a virus, a cure to a virus or something that they need to get somewhere urgently, so they're like on the clock. Anyways, that works. They set the whole planet on fire. Totally works. The Enterprise is like, got her. Ortegas is the only one crazy enough to set an entire planet on fire so that we can find her. And when the away team comes down, they're hiding in this little metal shell. So Ortegas comes out and she's like, we're here. And then the Gorn pilot comes out and is like, we're here. And as soon as they see the Gorn pilot, they just open fire because it looks like the Gorn came out of nowhere and tried to attack Ortegas. Like, from their point of view, that's exactly what it looks like. And so they're just like, pew, 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 pew. And Ortegas is like, no. And she's instantly dead. And what was really heartbreaking to me is that the Metrons didn't like revive the Gorn pilot and send her back home. They were just like, well, now the experiment's done. You can go back to your ship, but we're going to erase all your memories of this conversation. I thought that was messed up. Because they clearly had the power to do something about that. And they didn't. So as far as we know, that Gorn pilot is still just rotting on that moon for no good reason other than this useless experiment. Anyways, what was really nice about this episode was a couple of things. One, we get that callback to the Gorn and the Metrons. So that's the fan service for the TOS people who are like, Strange New Worlds is the only good show. It's the only good new Trek because it connects to old Trek, whatever. So there's a fan service for that. But then they elevate it by making it a more Darmok-like experience. So it's not just like Kirk fights a Gorn, but instead it's like Ortegas has to face her past with the Gorn, but also they become friends, and like whoever thought they could be friends. And then in the end, their friendship is doomed to fail. Of course it is. And she has to see her friend be gunned down, which is so heartbreaking. And it's like trauma on top of trauma for this girl, but welcome to Starfleet. And so, I don't know. I just feel like this episode had a few layers to it. And another thing that was nice is we got to see more of Ortegas, which is a character we don't see a ton of. So that was really nice because they could have easily done this with Pike. They could have done a captain to captain comparison. Although, I mean, they could have done that, and I'm glad they didn't. So there's a lot of good things working in this episode, and I think it was really sweet, and I think it was one of the stronger episodes of this latest season of Strange New Worlds, which was, mixed. I will say it that way. Okay, I'll check some of the chat, and then the puppet reminded me of Dark Crystal. I'll check some of the chat. There was actually somebody in that puppet, though. There was like a really tall dude in that puppet, and I think maybe even on stilts as well. Because I saw some pictures on Instagram from the actress who plays Ortegas of them like posing with the little headpiece off. So I think maybe just the face was like the animatronic puppet part, but I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into it. Let's see. I knew it would be Terrarium just as I had to leave. Boo. Oh, that sucks. Love this episode so much. Fascinating concept. I love some terrible movies too. The puppet reminded me of Dark Crystal. I read that one. In Star Trek Online, the Klingons conquered the Gorn, and now the Gorn hegemony is part of the Klingon Empire. That is so weird. Do the Gorn get to wear Klingon clothes? Just curious. Like, now that they're part of the Empire, do they have like a baldrake? And do they have like, tell me, what does this alliance look like? Or because they've been conquered, are they like lesser? They don't get the baldrakes? So curious. It's like Darmok, but more real. The stakes are clear from the beginning, and the two are never sure if they'll be rescued. Yes, I totally agree, Dustin, that this is like Darmok, but less artificially created by Dathan so that they could be friends, right? This was artificially created by the Metrons so that they could be friends, but they didn't know that, right? So as far as the Gorn pilot knew, she was just stranded forever. And Ortegas, however, was like, something's up. Like, from the moment she crash landed, she was like, something's up. And she saw these blinking white lights in the distance, and she was like, who is that? And why can't we ever get to them? You know, so from the very beginning, she was like, something's fishy here. I feel like I'm being watched, but she kind of tried to put that to the side to survive. Like, what do we need? We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need the force field to keep those monster things away. It wasn't until her friend was gunned down that she was just like, F this, and just started screaming like, I know you're here. Who set this up? Come face me, blah, blah, blah. And thankfully they did. And it was really wild, like, to see her break down like that, because I was rewatching it just to prepare for this conversation. And she had such emotional range in that scene that we have never seen before, because we don't see a ton of this character, but we get to see her just lose her crap. And we see La'an in the back like, beam us up, straight to sick bay. Something's going on with Ortegas. She's like really losing it right now. Maybe being on this moon was a bit too much for her. And as they're like beaming up, they're halfway through the transporter beam, the Metron stops it. And it's just glorious, gorgeous, beautiful. We get to see the cool, shiny things from the transporter, which I'm here for all day, every day. And now they're suspended. Like, yes, please. Yeah, so it's like Darmok, but the stakes are real and clear. I agree with you. The stakes are very clear. It's not an invisible monster that shows up and disappears. It's like Castaway, like survival or death. It is clear, or like a matter of time. Awesome episode on so many levels, especially since the Gorn look like Spider Dr. Smith from the Lost in Space movie. Oh my gosh, it does look like Spider Dr. Smith, now that you mention it. Talk about nightmares. That was the stuff of nightmares. Do you remember that scene when he opens his jacket and he's like, ha ha ha, and he reveals that he's like a giant spider full of spiders and all the baby spiders come out? I had nightmares from that scene. I was just like, run. Like, oh my gosh. Thanks for bringing that back. Strange New Worlds plot doesn't make sense. I don't know. What do you mean it doesn't make sense? It makes sense to me. Like, they're stranded on a planet and they need to be saved. That sounds pretty sensible. Better than Picard's with Darmok for challenges, as Picard spoke a language and Ortegas had to use symbolism. Yes, but Ortegas did make that like that makeshift universal translator where the Gorn captain could you're welcome. Where the Gorn captain could give yes or no responses. So they were able to communicate with the same language. And apparently the Gorn captain speaks English anyways. So, which I'm assuming Ortega speaks English, because we don't know, because universal translator, right? But the Gorn captain understands whatever she speaks and could respond with yes or no answers. It would have been just like Darmok if the Gorn did not understand her, like either, if they didn't understand each other. But it worked out that the Gorn understood everything that Ortegas was saying. It only had to say yes or no to questions. Yeah, and finally Ortegas does more than just fly the ship, which is, don't get me wrong, like, her flying the ship is great. She's good at flying the ship. But yeah, we get to see her character do something different, which is so fun. On the ocean, the Gorn call themselves Klingons now. Interesting. Do they look like Klingons though, in any way? Like, do their outfits look Klingon-y? That's what I want to know. Okay. All right, let's now look at the categories for this last episode, which is alien looks, set deck, character development, and storytelling. Now, for alien looks, obviously we have the Gorn again, and the Gorn have gotten a glow up, which is true for all of the new Trek that brings in any of the old, like, species or races or whatever. They give them a glow up and they look amazing. And not just the aliens, they do it for, I don't know if you saw this episode in Discovery, but there's an episode where they go and visit this library in the Badlands, and it's the same Badlands from Voyager. So it's basically like a giant thunderstorm, firestorm in space, which looked really cool in Voyager. But when you go back and look at it now, it just like doesn't hold up as well. So they gave that a glow up in Discovery, and it's like amazing. Like, it looks like this terrifying storm through space. It's really cool. So a lot of things got a glow up, including the Gorn. So they decided to make the Gorn look a little more lizard-like and less Party City costume-like. And I think they nailed it. They do look like giant lizards. They do. I also, though, feel like the Gorn puppet, while it looks more lizard-like, it also still looks like a puppet. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't even have to ask the question, is this going to hold up in 5, 10, 20 years? Because even now, I'm just like, You know what I mean? Like in a couple years when we have even better technology or whatever we're going to have, we're going to look back on this and be like, oh, wow, that's the best they could do with the Gorn. But it really is the best they could do with the Gorn. So can't really complain. The set was so much more amazing than Arena and Darmok. But also the set was, I'm pretty sure, just a soundstage and everything was CGI'd. So how do you compare those two? Do we prefer people just out in the mountains? Or do we prefer just a whole synthetic environment? Now, it needed to be synthetic because they crash landed on this crazy moon with this toxic atmosphere. They didn't crash land in the California mountains. So that's why it looks different. But I will say, even though it's more beautiful, I don't love it more. And here's why. This episode was so dark. I don't mean dark emotionally. I mean visually dark. Like the whole episode, you know how when you turn the brightness down on your computer to like 10%, like brightness? I feel like that was this entire episode. It was just shot in the dark. The whole thing is blue and black. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It looks like a painting. But like half the episode, I was like, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I don't know. But it's while the set was beautiful, I didn't like it as much as the other two, just for visual clarity's sake. It just was a little too dark to really appreciate. So I don't know. The alien look I think was really good. The set deck I don't think I loved as much as the other episodes. Okay, character development. Tons of development for both Ortegas and the Gorn. The development for the Gorn will not continue because she was gunned down, sadly, at the end of the episode. But for Ortegas, the assumption is that it will continue because the Metron said they were only going to remove the memories of the conversation that Ortegas had with the Metron. But everything else, she's allowed to keep, as the Metron put it. You may keep that. You can hang on to those memories. So the friendship that she developed, the fact that she could develop a friendship with a blood enemy, all of these things. And remember Ortegas, similar to some of the other people on the crew, but especially Ortegas. Do you remember that? What was that episode with that Klingon, what was he? That Klingon ambassador. And Ortegas was one of the ones who was just like, you can't trust Klingons. Klingons are terrible. I fought in the Klingon War. All Klingons are awful. You know what I mean? We can never work with them. All that stuff. So of course she had a similar feeling about the Gorn, especially after being stabbed in the back through the chest by a Gorn. But so I think for that reason, because she's more prone to being like us versus them, for her to have a moment where she's like, oh, this person could be more than what I've envisioned. They could actually be even a friend. They could have values like me. They could have, hobbies like me. They could play games like me. They're more dimensional than just like bloodthirsty killers or whatever I've imagined them to be. I think that's huge growth, huge character development, and she gets to keep that. Now, will we see that in the next season of Strange New Worlds? Probably not. Honestly, I'm hoping we never see the Gorn again. I've had all the Gorn. Two things I hope I never see again: Gorn and the Borg. And I like the Borg. I think they're a fun species. But we've had so much Borg. Like, I don't want to see the Gorn anymore. I don't want to see the Borg anymore. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see them anymore. So hopefully we never see them again. But maybe we'll see Ortegas grow in other ways. Maybe in conversations with La'an. Or maybe in other encounters with other species. And she can call back and be like, well, I remember this time when this happened. It's possible for things to change. I don't know. I hope she gets to keep this character development. But I think that was great. And the storytelling, I think, was really good. I think it was super cohesive. I think it was the best storytelling of the three. I think I would have really enjoyed this story as a kid. There weren't parts where I was just confused or bored. I think it was really straightforward. Yeah, and the A plot, the B plot lined up. It was similar to Arena or Darmok, where they're like, we got to get Ortegas back. How are we going to get her back? Except for in this case, Una was like, we also need to leave. Like, we can't stay here forever. And then Uhura is like, but we can't leave her. She's my best friend. We can't just abandon her. So there was a little more tension in the B plot than in previous shows, right? Where they were just like, get the captain back. Like, we just need to get the captain back. There was no internal debate about that. So that added another layer. I think the storytelling was the most cohesive, and I think it was the most interesting. I definitely had more drama in the B plot, but I liked the drama in the B plot. It gave the other characters something more to do other than, let's just get her back. We had some tension of like, should we not? How long do we have to wait? And stuff like that. So let's see. The Gorn are merciful and quick. My favorite Gorn depiction was from Enterprise. Oh my gosh, the Gorn are in Enterprise? They always prefer a physical set. I always prefer a physical set, says Gavin. Yeah, I don't think I mind either way. Just in this case, it was harder for me to appreciate it just because it was just so dark and hard to see. They have an AR wall. They shot it in the dark to mask the bad CGI. There are so many shows and movies that have literally been CGI'd to death. It is like Enemy Mine. It's exactly like Enemy Mine. And I think Darmok was based off of Enemy Mine. That's my hypothesis. So if Darmok was based off Enemy Mine, then Terrarium was based off Darmok, which was based off Enemy Mine. All Gorned out. Yeah. Dustin says easily the season's best. I probably agree with you. I'm trying to remember all the episodes from the season, but I just keep remembering ones that make me mad. So I'll take your word for it. Um, yeah, Savage when she's done with the Gorn. Karen, that's great. Okay, so based on these three categories, which do you think did it better? TOS, TNG, or Strange New Worlds? So as far as alien looks, man, the Gorn in TOS, so iconic, so classic, like set the tone. Darmok, the Terrarians, amazing. Like that makeup job was flawless. And then we have the Gorn in Strange New Worlds, which did look more realistic as far as actual creatures that could exist, but it also still looked like a puppet. Of the three, I would give the points to Darmok, personally. I would say Darmok did that better. And then character development. I don't really feel like, I feel like maybe there was a little bit for Kirk in Arena. I feel like there was maybe a little bit for Picard in Darmok. But see, again, it's like, oh, he learned to communicate and understand other people better, but he was already like that. He's like the perfect ambassador. He's already that way. And then Strange New Worlds, there was tons of character development for Ortegas, like facing her demons, changing her mindset, realizing that others can be a lot more same than you think. Huge. So Strange New Worlds wins that by a landslide. And then storytelling. I think TOS was a little scattered. I think Darmok was a little frustrating and confusing. And I think Strange New Worlds was the most cohesive. So in these three categories, based on my votes, in my opinion, I would have to give this to Strange New Worlds. But let me know your thoughts in the chat. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay. CGI Gorn for Enterprise had big whippy tails. Do they still look? I'll have to wait till I get to Enterprise. I had no idea the Gorn were in Enterprise, which I just think is so funny. Enterprise is going to be a whole experience. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of TOS. Gavin said not Gavin, TOS. TOS is still the best. I see a TNG. I see one Strange New Worlds. I see one TNG. And then Gavin, my friend, you can only vote once. I'm seeing like 1, 2, 3, 4 for TOS. Yeah, based on the criteria. And then Dustin is following the rules. Based on the criteria, it's Strange New Worlds that wins in all categories. Obviously, we can do different criteria, like which one's my favorite, or like which one do I remember most from being a kid, or something like that. That's a whole different thing. Whole different categories that you could also vote on. But that's just not what we're talking about today. Yeah, Strange New Worlds is the winner overall, in my opinion. From the chat, it looks like TOS is the winner by 2 votes. By 2 votes. Okay, but that's just the chat. I haven't heard from you in the comments. For those of you watching on the replay, let me know below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you to everybody who joined me live. Again, thanks to everybody who joined on the